Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christeen and
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership. Hello, Christeen. How are you today?
I am great. It's my last day in the office for about a week and a half. I'm about ready to go on vacation, so I'm just pretty happy. How about you?
Awesome. Yeah, it's a good day. It's Friday, end of the week. Had a super busy week, got a lot done. Talked to a lot of people. It was a pretty exciting week. People are making big changes in their business, that we've been working with, and they're reporting the changes this week. We're little more than halfway through the year, and it's really good to see those gross profit margins moving in their companies. And that's literally the two texts I got this morning reporting the progress they made in the gross profit margins, which is super exciting to me because today, in today's episode, we're going to be sharing some valuable insights about managing and controlling gross profit margin. This knowledge is essential for every business owner or manager on any company. Gross profit margin is a crucial financial metric that can significantly impact a company's success.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite KPIs. And, it really tells us, what are we doing right? And if we're doing something wrong, that's really where it's going to show up. And if we have it set up properly, then we can fix it, whatever it is in the business that's bleeding our profit. So I love that KPI. It's fantastic. So I thought we would start by defining what exactly gross profit margin is and why it matters. I feel like it's one of those KPIs in a business that people hear a lot about. It's thrown around, and there's a misunderstanding of what it is and how it can support the business.
It is very misunderstood, and commonly when I'm coaching people, I have to go over a number of times, and we have to practice it and repeat it and practice again and again until it's really dialed in. So it's crucially important, plays an incredible impact on the business.
So the gross profit margin is a percentage that represents the profit a company makes after deducting gross costs associated with producing or selling its products or services. So maybe, Steve, you can explain from understanding your profit and loss statement, what does that mean? What are the things that would be in those categories?
So what we're going to do, let's say we do a landscape insulation job, right? And we're going to take the total sale of the job. Let's say it was $10,000. And we used $2,000 worth of plants, and then we had $2,000 worth of labor, right? So we're going to subtract the $2,000 in plants and the $2,000 in labor from the $10,000, and that's going to leave us with $6,000. That's $6,000, and we had no subs, and we had no special equipment rental. And the only direct costs were the plants and our labor. So we're going to deduct the labor and the plants, $4,000. That gives us a $6,000 gross profit margin. So that would be a 60% gross profit margin.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. It may seem complicated. And of course, with the business structure, the more you're having in there as far as those costs to service your business, then the more complicated it can get. But really, it's a concept of addition and subtraction of how much revenue do we get in, what's coming out, and what's left over, and then turning that into a percentage. And so it may seem complicated. It can be fairly simple, and it can give you a lot of information on how your business is performing and what profit is possible, like the opportunity around profitability in your business. So, profit margins, they help businesses, the whole reason for them. They help them understand how effectively they're utilizing their resources, managing their costs, and pricing their products and service. And I think that's kind of a good topic to talk around a little bit, is that pricing, because I feel like, Steve, you, especially with the people that we work with, you spend a lot of time not just coaching around gross profit margin, but also, around their pricing, which has a huge impact on their gross profit margin.
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time dialing in the gross profit margin, what the markups need to be so they can hit the gross profit margins. And that includes, even if they have subs, they have to mark the subs up and to hit the gross profit margins, and if they're renting any special equipment, that needs to be included in the cost of the job. But they also need to mark up the special equipment they bring in. And the thing is, for every dollar they bring in where they don't have the markups, they don't get the margin, they have to make that margin up somewhere else. So you either have to have an overinflated markup or margins on your labor or your material. So it's much more strategic to do the proper markup and margins on everything. So your material, special equipment, your subs, and all your labor.
Yeah, and I know some of the things that I've heard shared in our group coaching program as well is the complexity around those margins and markups with the pricing, to where they'll have all these different materials and they'll be pricing them at, with a different markup or margin on those materials, and it makes it very complex. So one of the things that can also impact your gross profit margin, it's not just, not having the pricing dialed in, not marking up everything that you have, but then making it super complex to where you're marking it up at these different amounts, and it doesn't make sense. So it's kind of overthinking it, making it very challenging, and then something that can be difficult to manage.
Yes, and sometimes they make it. Some people have made it so complicated that they get confused explaining it to me. So they have markups and percentages and markups for every item and every different thing, and really simplifying it down to, what are you going to mark up soft goods or green goods? What are you going to mark up hard goods? And there's high perceived value goods. So there's certain items and goods that we're selling our customers that can be marked up even higher than like a green or soft good, just because the perceived value of that good is much higher. Landscape lighting is like that.
Yeah.
So there's certain items that people expect to be expensive, and that is a good place to recoup margin in those expected costs. Like if people are expecting it to be expensive, if you order a porterhouse steak at a steakhouse, you're expecting it to be expensive. You want it to be expensive. So there are certain things you need to do. So getting the prices dialed in is one of the first things I do when I start working with our coaching clients. And it's typically either way off on a few things, or, it's just marginally off. But, getting that price dialed in affects the bottom line tremendously. Just increasing your gross profit margin by 5% can increase your net by 30%.
Wow. Yeah, that's a huge difference. That's huge. And that could be, easily hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit a year.
Absolutely, it's a game changer. And it's really, if the customer was going to buy it at $1,000, they're going to buy it at $1,100. So, that 10% can add a 50% increase to your net. So it's really important to make sure that the pricing is correct, because we don't want to go out of business or go broke working hard, right? And so knowing our gross profit margin is like one of the first steps with the pricing. And then you're always pricing correct, and it takes the emotion out of it. So if a person goes, well, I can't afford that, that's too much, you know why you have that price. So there's a lot more confidence when you give your estimates if you know exactly why the dollars are the way they are.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, is the pricing can be tied to emotion, or not being comfortable with asking for what you're worth or what your services and your company are worth, and that can have a huge impact on your gross profit margin.
Yes, it's good to have friends, but we don't need to go broke having friends, being the nice guy, or helping someone out. They're not really our friends if they're wanting us to go broke because we're not charging enough, or we're not really helping them out in the long run if we don't have a healthy business.
Yeah, and they might not even know either. They might just be making assumptions around like, oh yeah, they're super affordable. They always do me solids, and it's always the best intentions. But I'm sure that if it was explained to anybody who's asking for those services, they would not feel good about the impact it was having on their business as well.
Yeah, they don't. Most consumers are like the right thing to do as a consumer is, hey, can I get a better deal? Can I get a better price? They're just asking, and just if we can explain, hey, this is why the price is that because this is what this costs. We need to recover these costs to cover our overhead to have a healthy profit margin to stay in business. Then people are like, oh, I get it. They have to ask, right?
Right. Yeah, and this kind of goes into like our next topic of why is it that, monitoring your gross profit margin in your business is so important, and then as well, like what are the some of the potential consequences of neglecting it? And I know in working with businesses over the years, there are certain areas that we've unpacked just by them doing a profit first assessment or a scalable business model assessment, as we outline in chapter 8 in the book. Once they do that and we lay our eyes on it, we can instantly see areas of opportunity in increasing their gross profit margin and where they're possibly bleeding because either they have too much labor, they have too much equipment, they're not pricing it properly, like something's off, but it waves a huge red flag and we can start asking questions. So what are some of the things that you have found in working with some of our, coaching clients in the one-on-one basis, like that they're finding with when they're neglecting their managing their gross profit margins?
So the first thing is cash is always tight if they're not managing the gross profit margin because it typically is 40% or below. And when you hit that 40% gross profit margin in the company, there's no money. I call it the smoke alarm because after you take that 40% gross profit margin, and you pay all of your overhead, your office, staff, salespeople, even if you're an S corp yourself, and your rent, utilities, advertising, everything else, then and you also have to have a profit, right? There's no money left for profit, and if we don't have profit, we can't sustain and grow the business. So I call 40% the smoke alarm, and once we drop down to 35%, now we're on fire. There's just no money left at 35%. So, we're always shooting for a minimum of 50% gross profit margin. And once they hit that 50% gross profit margin, I get a text today, they hit 53% so far year to date. And they finally have the cash flow to breathe. They have room, they have cash to breathe. It's not week to week going, waiting for checks to clear to meet all their obligations. And then we're going to move that goal up to 55%, 58%, and 60%. And the other thing that I find is they're not tracking their gross profit margin by either department, division, or job type. So we don't know what the gross profit margin is in lawn mowing, what the gross profit margin is in landscape install, what the gross profit margin is on mulch jobs versus planting jobs versus hardscape jobs. So we start to track that and to see, what's the area that you do the most revenue in? We're going to track that first, and then we'll go down from there. Because if 70% of your work is mowing, we're going to start tracking mowing first and see what your gross profit margin is. If 70% is hardscape install, we're going to track that, and then we'll go from there. So we can do it by what's going to affect the business and impact the business the most, the fastest.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think it also reflects your gross profit margin is how efficient your team is and the operations of the business, because labor is and payroll is one of the biggest bleeds in a company besides equipment and subcontractors and materials. So when you're looking at labor, we're looking at how many people are on a crew, how many people do they have employed in their office, who's doing what jobs, is the install, or delivery of application, is it efficient? Is the routing efficient? So there's all these things that we can take in consideration that can improve the gross profit margin. And the gross profit margin is telling us whether or not a company is healthy? Are they financially healthy? Are they surviving or are they thriving? And what are the factors that are contributing to that? So again, like here's this KPI showing up. It seems, really simple, and it is to figure out, but then it's going to tell us so many things about the business and little corrections that can be made that's going to have a huge, huge impact.
Yeah, and too many people on a crew, we find that frequently, and the people say, I get explained, I call it mansplain it to me. No, I have four guys on this crew, so we can bust it out. But they have like a 37% gross profit margin. And I'm like, well, if you had two men on the crew and you got it done in this amount, could they do it in this amount of time? Oh yeah. So it's going to take longer, but now your gross profit margin is 50%. So now you just made, 15 points on your gross profit margin, which is going to add, 60% to your net. So it might be better to slow down the jobs and have them take longer, and you're going to actually net more money. And you might have to add another crew. You might have to figure out some management. But putting guys on crews or putting crews together to bust it out, to get it done quicker, it feels good because you got to bill them, but you literally just, shot yourself in the foot. And some people love big crews. They love to see lots of guys. When I see 6 or 7 guys with backpack blowers on a lawn blowing, the same leaves back and forth, that gross profit margin, I can tell you it's under 40%, guaranteed. If I see 6 guys on a residential landscape crew, I can tell you their gross profit margin is 40% or below. And, thinning out the bad performing or low performing people is the first thing to do. And then also helping the owner get over that, busted out concept, because they want to please as many people as they can by being the hero and getting all these jobs done. But it's literally costing them their future and a small fortune.
Yeah, and I like one of the things that you said, like having too many people in the crew, you want to get rid of your bad people. But I know that if you have, it's like the concept's too many cooks in the kitchen, right? You can't tell who's the bad cook. So it kind of hides. It's another way of hiding, who isn't as productive on your crew or your team and who isn't pulling their weight. So I think having the right crew size, it doesn't only support, the gross profit margin on a job, it helps you trim the fat in your business when you allow the right amount of people to show up to do the right job. And you can really see who's pulling their weight and, who's a fast mover, like who's moving and shaking versus somebody who's just kind of dragging their feet or even creating more issues on a job site.
Yeah. And, that's the thing. What's the goal of having the business, right? It's to make money, earn a living, to support our family and our community. Busting it out is not a goal. Like getting as many jobs done as fast as you can in the year and not making any money. Like no one sits down and says, my goal this year is going to be to bust out these going broke jobs. I've never heard that from anybody. But when we get in the heat of the battle and the heat of that moment, the 100 days of hell, for some reason, that is where we go to. I've been guilty of it myself. I've been guilty of it. And it's cost me, tremendously to do that. And now that I know the numbers, we know what size the job has to be to put 3 or 4 people on. What size, a cleanup would have to be to have 3 or 4 people on it. What size a mowing job would have to be to have more than one person on it. And the thing is, a lot of times so I'm a big advocate of one-man crews. They're the most productive. They have the highest gross profit margin. They have the highest net. And people are like, well, people don't want to work alone. They don't want to have to do the whole job themselves. The challenge is they're working, whether they're working alone or with somebody else. Like they have that job. If they're mowing lawns, they're either mowing, blowing, trimming, or driving, whether they're working with 2 guys or working by themselves or working with 4 guys. So, really that can't work alone. And a lot of my employees work alone and have for years. And it does take a certain employee to be able to do that. But, that is where you get the higher gross profit margins.
Yeah, and that's what's important is getting the higher gross profit margin. and ensuring that your crew size is the right fit for the services that you're providing. And I've been to your place of business and I've seen your guys get started and everybody moving around and the energy that's there. And there doesn't seem to be an issue with the fact that they go out for the day and work alone. It brings more meaning from what I saw to the amount of time that they are connecting, starting out their day, and it really energizes them. And then they come back and they connect again, and it energizes them. So I think it makes the time that they do connect more meaningful, and they're highly productive.
And once they get used to the smaller crew size, they enjoy it because there's more accountability. The quality goes up. And they talk during the day. They might be on, texting each other. There's going to be some communication, but it's really about, especially with mowing and lawn applications. I had a friend that says if you have two men on a lawn application crew, one man's Batman, the other one's robbing you.
Right.
They're literally stealing from you. The three guy on a residential mowing crew, that third guy, I call him the audience guy. Somebody's watching on a 3-man residential crew. I have lots of data to prove it, and people always disagree with me, but they don't have any data. So it's completely just an opinion. They have nothing to prove it because they always did a 3-man crew. And so, getting them to go down. We have one of our clients that I got to go to 1-man crews. He will never go back. They're producing only $15 less per total hour with 1 man than with the 2-man crew. So, they're at like $55 an hour with a 1-man crew, and they were at $70 an hour with the 2-man crew. So it just doesn't make any sense to ever go back to that. And what's interesting was the quality's gone up because there's people responsible for their work. There's, if you're at Mrs. Jones's house and there's an issue, you're the guy.
Yeah. Yeah. There's nobody to put the blame on or, push it off on. So I like the idea of accountability also can tie to, an opportunity around gross profit margin. And in any company, if we're intentionally or unintentionally neglecting that profit margin, it's going to, one, reduce the profitability, the potential for long-term financial, stability. And also, it's going to continue to decrease, which is going to result in cash flow issues or even a business failure. So I think it's extremely important to know your gross profit margin. And in addition to that, track your gross profit margin because business is fluid. Things are constantly changing.
Yes. And, materials change all the time. Costs change all the time. So you definitely want to change, you definitely want to change your pricing and your margins accordingly. And that was, never was that so evident as since COVID. 2019, up to that point, things were, pretty stable percentage wise. And then COVID hit and then, holy smokes. I mean, we were giving out prices. They were good for the week. You had 1 week to decide, and then we had to buy the materials and get that procured if we're doing landscape installs because, in 2 weeks, we don't know, A, was that even going to be available, that material, or B, what the price was going to be.
Right.
So you really have to pay attention to that.
Yeah, and I feel like that's one of the strategies, which I would love to give our listeners some strategies and best practices, that they can implement as business owners or even their managers can implement to control their gross profit margin effectively. And, look at like what are key factors that they should consider on a regular basis and managing the gross profit margin and running their business.
So watching materials is one of the biggest things, material costs, and even if like up to 2019, there was this creep that was happening. And it was happening not only on the supplier side, but I'll give you an example. So like for installing paver patios and sidewalks, the process had changed over the years. A long time ago, we weren't doing fabric underneath and we did fabric and then we had wider bases. And so that needed to be, we're using more material plus the fabric and different base material. And then, we're cutting wide, it's called, right? So we're going to lay wide, and then we're going to cut all these curves and everything. We're not turning block anymore. So you have higher waste. So you need to know how much waste is on your hardscape job. So if it's a 1,200 foot patio, and you're not going to order 1,200 feet of block. So you can't charge the customer for 1,200 feet of block. You're going to end up using 1,380 feet, which is really 1,400 feet of block, because by the time you're done with the waste. So watching the waste that is going, or the total material that is going into that job, and not just like, if you're doing the estimate, you can't calculate a 1,200 foot patio with 1,200 feet of stone, knowing how much waste that you're going to have in that. And then there's also costs that are like, I call them ghost costs. We bought in 1,280 yards of mulch last year, but somehow we only build 1,120, so where did the other 100 and something yards of mulch go, right? It's, a quarter yard there, a half a yard here and everything. So we know every year we're going to buy X amount of mulch and really, but only sell or install Y amount. So we have to know what percentage of that. So any overages that we're going to use of material, we have to count that in. So we know if we're going to go 10% over on mulch every year, we need to put that into the cost. So those are things we really want to pay attention to. And then the other thing is, when we're doing our estimating, paying attention to drive time. We know, okay, that job can take X amount, but let's say if it's 10 minutes from the shop, let's say that's going to take 30 hours. But now it's an hour from the shop and you have 2 guys, you could have just had 4 more man hours. Now we're at 34 man hours for that job as opposed to 30. That's more than a 10% difference. So that travel time can really nip at your gross profit margin. And you're wondering, man, my crews are doing so good. Why am I off on these gross profit margins? So that's always going to be a tell on your estimating. And I'm a firm believer that you're going to make more money estimating properly than anything else in contracting. There's nothing you can do more that will have more impact on profitability and sales than estimating correctly. And that includes the travel time. So watching your total labor creep or labor ghosting, or your equipment, your materials.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say again, labor burden as well. And this ties into, knowing the man hours that need to be spent in an entire year and how much of those are production. And I've seen this many times in many different industries, and working with the contracting industry for over 25 years. And then also working with other, service related professionals, is there's kind of like this gap of time that they don't account for. They go, oh, well, I have a team that's, 80% of their time they're spending on production, making money. And they don't think about the other 20% of time that's kind of just lost of them being there, showing up for meetings, having training, driving to and from a job, assisting with other tasks, maybe fueling or setting up a truck or, off-season stuff. So there's all this other time. So what we really need to look at with that gross profit margin is we need to look at the total labor hours and how much the production time will produce in revenue, and make sure that we're pricing that revenue right with production that's going to cover the 80% and the 20%. So it's covering for that gap. Core Growth Strategies provides business growth management solutions through cloud accounting, bookkeeping, and strategic business consulting programs. Our team works with small businesses in lawn care and landscape and trade industries throughout the U.S. We increase our clients' business acumen by creating business performance transparency through financials and strategic advisement based on industry best practices and benchmarks. Our experienced team provides support, guidance, and coaching, thereby allowing our clients to connect with viable data and discover their own solutions. Core Growth Strategies programs and services are designed to get your business from where it is now to where you have always dreamed it to be. Visit us today at coregrowthstrategies.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't miss our exclusive limited time podcast special. Just mention promo code GPA Pro to any member of our team during your complimentary consultation, or enter the promo code on our site when you sign up for one of our online programs. That's promo code GPA Pro.
And part of that is overtime. So when we're estimating jobs, we're not typically estimating, okay, this job is going to run into Friday afternoon, and after 1 o'clock, that job's all overtime. So you have to, know how much overtime for the whole year that you're selling, and then figure your cost into that. So if each employee is going to have, 300 hours a year of overtime, you have 10 people, that's 3,000 hours a year that you have to calculate into your labor cost. And that way you're not, because if you're working on that job on a Friday afternoon, really the Monday job had an effect on that. So one of the secrets that we've always done is doing that. We're figuring that overhead cost and the total labor cost plus the labor burden. So we don't have to nitpick about, we can't, no overtime, because they didn't plan for it and they didn't calculate it. Our pricing is priced with those hours of overtime.
Yeah. And that's important to know. Like, you can get that information from historical data, based on your capacity and looking at your team as well with production hours. Like if we have, 300 hours to produce this week, what does that look like? How are we going to get that done with this many crew members? And then as well, what is it that we're going to have to pay them? So, being mindful of not just, what are your costs when it comes to materials? What are your costs when it comes to other production related expenses and equipment and rental and subcontractors, but really being mindful of that hourly wage in addition to the labor burden, in addition to any overtime pay. And I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. And so there's so many opportunities to make the right adjustments to increase that gross profit margin and to really get your pricing dialed in.
And typically, a lot of people tell me, I can't raise my prices. We're already the most expensive person in the market. That's what my customers are telling me. And that's what they're telling everybody they talk to, right? I mean, they're telling everybody they're too expensive. The reality is that you have to run your business with your numbers, with your costs, if you're going to stay in business. I've been told that, almost my entire, landscaping career, that we're too expensive. And but we're still in business and we're thriving. And a lot of the companies that are always 20 or 30 or 40% less than me, they are either struggling to this day or they're gone. They're that's kind of the road. If your gross profit margins aren't dialed in, you're either going to go down the struggle path or you're going out of business.
Yeah, and that's where, your pricing strategy needs to come in place. And people might say, well, what's a pricing strategy? And, we even have one in our company to where it's like we're monitoring certain KPIs and we're getting feedback on our production team and we're seeing, what are people doing? What are their hours? Where is this going? But if we don't have a pricing strategy in our business, then it's going to be extremely difficult and I think even overwhelming to step up to the plate and make sure that you're pricing properly. So what are some of the things that you guys are doing in your business that you have found out as good pricing strategies that make it easy for you to make the adjustment?
So first off is knowing all these costs, and it takes the emotion out of it. And then the other thing is to, we don't itemize stuff for our customers. Like a landscape job is $9,000, it's $10,000. We don't break it out by plant. We don't break out the labor hours. We are breaking out, this job includes, 100 yards of soil. It includes, 20 10-gallon shrubs, 30, 2-gallon perennials. We're doing quantities like that, but there's no items, there's no amount next to those shrubs. So we're not itemizing it. And so 75% of the people actually, their brains digest that and process that much easier. If you start listing out too much, they get confused. 25% of the people definitely want more information. But with that, we just focus on what's in the job. We never break out jobs. We never itemize anything, and people can push us and push us for the itemization. We just won't do it. And we explain this is our process, and this is what is. It's a job. It's kind of like you never go to McDonald's and say, "Well, I want this French fry broken out." How much was it for the container? How much was it for the salt? How much was it for, the labor to cook that? How much was it for the time at the register? So typically I'll just say, well, this is what includes in the job, our office, our team, all these different things. And they'll hopefully get it at that point. So that's one of the things. The other thing is making packages and choices for people to choose. So they're focusing on, good, better, and best. So, 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, instead of just giving one price where they pick it apart. We're giving them 3 different options to choose from. And that could be just different plant sizes. Or, we'll add something like if they said they want a 1,000-foot patio and a walk going back to the patio, we'll give them a price. The walk will be 4 feet wide. The patio will make it a little bit bigger, and we'll put an area for the grill. Maybe we'll throw a fire pit in, and then we're going to give them the price what they wanted, but we're also going to give them extras and then extras. And based on a lot of that is based on what our customers have really enjoyed or found value from before. So it's not just an upsell, it's like these are value adds that people really enjoy. So the good, better, best, not giving anything itemized, making it really easy for people to buy, not making them jump through a lot of hoops to sign up or pay you. We also do most of our presentations in person. We don't like to email stuff. If it's a long-time customer that's been working with us for years, yes, we'll email stuff. But if you're a new customer or a newer customer, we're going to walk you through the whole process and that contract. So it's not just, we're not shooting emails off. We're trying to build relationships. And people buy from people they like. They'll pay more for people they like. They'll pay more for people that pay attention to them, listen, hear, and see them. Than just an electronic communication.
Yeah, and I love the pricing strategy that you shared around the good, better, best. It's something we do in our company as well. And, it really gives them an idea of, at a minimum, what do you want? And then let's level that up and let's level that up. And have you thought about this before? Because we're the industry specialists. We know what it is that we're delivering in our services and what helps them the most, whether it's another business, on my side or with your lawn and landscape company, they're homeowners and, it's their properties. So you guys have this natural skill set to know and envision what they're looking at, saying from a basic concept and saying, but what if we did this, or what if we did this? And typically when people have, something done on their property, they have a budget. And this is, typically what they're willing to spend. We never know what we're coming in at. We can make assumptions till the cows come home, but until we have that conversation with them and we understand what is it that you need, and then put together some sort of, project scope with that good, better, best concept, they might end up buying the best thing because they could have been like, well, we really thought it was going to be $25,000 and we were only going to get this minimum, but we didn't even think about this and this, adding this on. And yeah, let's do that. So it's this automatic upsell without any extra work, and you and your company going the extra mile, which a lot of consumers would appreciate because they don't have the vision and of the opportunity when it comes to landscape design as a landscape company would.
And one of the things that I've learned is, if there's always the $25 Mo guy out there, there's always somebody that's going to do it cheaper. And one of the worst things, and I've fallen prey to it, and that's why I know it doesn't work, is trying to meet or beat that price. And the thing is, if you want to be broke like them, do like they do, right? Act like they do, price like they price. So,
Hmm.
you really want to separate yourself as much as you can from the typical, not just landscaper, but any small business or contractor that doesn't call people back. They don't get their estimates back. Matter of fact, they don't even tell their customers when the estimate's going to be back. They don't get the estimates back promptly or quickly. The communication just is really, really not good. And with cell phones and emails and text and messaging, there's really no reason not to communicate with your customers. And I will tell you, customers place a high value on that communication. And if
Hmm.
you're struggling with your gross profit margins because you can't charge more, the communication tool is so valuable. Your calculator and your communication.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. As being a homeowner, and my husband and I have several times reached out to contractors, because our house was built in 2007. The people who lived in here prior didn't take very good care of it. So it needed a lot of love. And we've been having to do various little things over time. And it's been really hard for us to find good contractors. And my husband's the type of man he's like, he'll throw money at a problem just to solve it because it's worth it to him. So if somebody shows up and they're reliable and they're charging more, he'll pay them more without even a question. He's like, well, how do you manage this? What are you going to do? And if he hears that we take care of you and sees the proof, he'll pick the guy that's going to take care of the process so it's less headache for him versus, the cheaper guy. And every time, it's paid off to where if we pay a higher price, the person who's delivering the service or that company, they've really shown up and they've done what we wanted to do. And we've seen value in that. And we automatically will call them back. Like we have a handyman guy that we work with, and we call them back again and again because we can rely on them, even though they're pricey.
And that's just a great model, right? I mean, we have done over 5,000 landscape projects, and 70% is for the same people. We basically have really stopped advertising 5 years ago, and it's just all repeat and referrals because of the relationships we've built over the years. And so, yeah, I mean, you have to show up. So if you're struggling with your gross profit margin, I would recommend looking at your sales process, your how you're delivering your communication. And if you're showing up like the $25 Mo guy, then they're going to compare you to that. If you're not looking and communicating like the $25 Mo guy, they're going to expect to pay more. The other thing is, not everyone's your customer. Not everyone is our customer.
Hmm.
And that is a reality, through the pumpkin planning process, that we can really come into our own and realize that this is our customer and this is where we need to go to live to make the gross profit margin that we need.
So what I'm hearing is part of the pricing strategy is really knowing your brand and keeping true to your brand in addition to your pricing. So if you're pricing poorly and you're cheap, you're going to be perceived as cheap. If you're pricing at the right amount or even high, you're going to be perceived as a good value or a better value, a high-end value. And in addition to that, we have to show up, to represent our brand in order to hold, that brand image in place with our community and our marketplace.
Absolutely. And that's over and over again, right? I mean, that's why people will pay top dollar for a can of Coca-Cola, and they're not going to buy, not everyone will buy that off-label cola. And if you gave a real Coke or Pepsi fan an off-label cola, they could tell in a split second, and they're willing to pay for that Coca-Cola can. And look how successful and how old Coca-Cola has been around. And that one time they tried to change it was a huge mistake.
Yeah, I was actually just listening to a book that was talking about that concept of when Coca-Cola went through and Pepsi went through the blind taste tests and the impact that it had on the brand because they were trying to match Pepsi. and again, it was like, well, it's too sweet. It's too sweet. Well, the Pepsi people like what's sweet. And, the Coca-Cola people like exactly the way it was. It was, just right. So, really speaking to your ideal customer and is important and not changing to be everything to everybody.
And I think that's one of the biggest things I had to learn. It was a hard lesson too. I don't focus on my competition at all. I focus on my clients. I focus on the people who are voting for me with their wallets. I don't care what my competition is doing. I only care what people who are actually paying me want, need. I listen, I hear, I see, I feel what they're feeling. And that's where our focus has been. And it's been a game changer. We connect so much deeper with our client base and provide, even if we can't provide all the services they would really love, we provide the ones that we can at the highest level quality we can.
Yeah. So some of the pricing strategies that we've gone over so far is to make sure you analyze your cost structure in your business, which means identifying, the cost when it comes to your material, your labor, production related expenses. This is going to include subcontractors. This is going to include specialized materials, equipment, other rentals that you may have to make. And, when I say equipment, this is the equipment that you own or that you rent. So making sure that you're pricing those, at a reasonable, don't go below like that 50%. Make sure your margin is in place. And then also know your pricing strategy. So have something in place where it's like a good, better, best concept. And then knowing like, okay, these are our markups and our margins on our material. This is what it is on equipment. This is what it is on labor, and so on. So making sure like what's your base, what are you paying, and then what are your markups, and to calculate your margins on those. And the last one that I think is really important is, and this is something that I have found time and time again, um, it's managing inventory levels and avoiding excess costs on the business because you are managing your inventory levels. And I've seen time and time again where business owners are going, I don't know why, we had this much material. It's usually this much. This is the percentage. We're off, and we dig in. And it's because, they don't understand what's in their inventory. They don't know, and things are being purchased that they don't need. And we've implemented inventory management systems in companies, and that alone has improved their gross profit margin and has paid for itself.
Yeah, inventories can get a little wonky if you're not paying attention to it, and you end up with an extra pallet here and an extra pallet there. I mean, if you have an extra pallet of grass seed, at $130 a bag, you're talking, $5,200 ish just in grass seed, just sitting there. 2 pallets is over 10 grand. If you have a pallet of fertilizer and Accelerprint at 35 or $40 a bag, it's $1,600 a pallet. That stuff, so 5 grand here, 1,600 here, it starts to add up. And then just, if you have liquid Accelerprint at $300 for a gallon or half a gallon, I mean, that stuff starts to add up very quickly. You can end up with, an extra $40,000 of inventory without really realizing it. Next thing you know, you've got 40 grand that should have been in the business sitting out in your garage or your barn or your shop.
Yeah, and I know some of the other things that we've covered in the past is reviewing, their product and their service mix, because that's another key factor to where you've talked about, the boneyard, and it's like all of these other pavers and whatnot, because you offer so many different types of pavers or so many different types of plants or, materials. So, that's another area where they can improve the cost, reduce the cost, and contribute to a healthy gross profit margin.
Yeah, and like for us, we only use Techo Block pavers and we only use thermal bluestone, right? So that's it. And have we lost jobs because we did not use other types of pavers? Yes, we have. Did the customers come back to me 2 years later and say, you know what? I should have went with you. That was a big mistake to use that other product and that other contractor. And these are the issues that I'm facing. And I really can't help them because we can't go back and fix the other guy's product because our product won't match. But using the Techo block, it has the least variance in their production. And then thermal bluestone, it's the same thing. So our boneyard is very, very thin because we can use the pavers in all these different jobs. We only will use 4 different colors, and people will ask for all kinds of stuff. And it just, once that, you can do a lot with different color combinations and blending and edge colors and variances and stuff. But once you start getting into 3 or 4 different makes and models and manufacturers, you're going to end up with all kinds of a boneyard. Plus, it slows your crew down because these pavers lay different. There's different patterns and thicknesses, and you have to have different screed rails if the thicknesses are different. And, so the grade has to be different because you're going to excavate down lower. Just the more complication that you have, the tougher it is to hit your gross profit margins.
Yeah, and that goes back to systematizing your service and your products and what you provide, which is another pumpkin plan strategy. So if you can't see me, I'm smiling because my wheels are turning when it comes. You're talking about this, like it slows down your crew. You have an excess of waste. It's not as efficient. The systems change. Like all these things start coming up in my mind when I hear businesses providing too many different types of services, too many different types of, material. And I mean, it changes your business model and it could have a huge impact on your gross profit margin. So one of the things I want to chat about before we tie this up today, and I think it can give some business owners out there that are listening some insight, is the challenges that a business may face when they're trying to control their gross profit margin, and even like how to overcome it. So I know some of the challenges, they include, market fluctuation, increased competition, and rising costs, which is what we had to navigate, when things were changing in this industry through COVID. And it's also essential in any industries to stay informed on the market trends, customer demands, and even price sensitivities as well. And some of those things can be avoided just by educating our ideal customers and letting them know, like, hey, we have supplier issues, or since this happened, this price has gone up. So you're going to see some of this stuff, like when fuel spiked, and just communicating those changes. So, that's a challenge around the services and materials that you provide in your business to your customers, is if you don't communicate the price adjustments, that can be a challenge because there's a lot of assumption that can be made.
Oh, absolutely. And fertilizers double from, 2013. It's up 100%. Some of other materials are up 100% plus. And communicating that to people, the thing is, if it's up 100, so let's say it went from $15 to $30 for a bag. And so let's say that's $1 per 1,000 square feet on a 10,000 square foot lawn. It went up $10 per app on the material cost. So on 5 apps, that's $50 a year. Plus your markup. So it's $100 a year that it went up, but that's 10 years. So you're talking, it's going up $10 a year. It's a fractional increase, but we need to pay attention to that, because if we don't, we're going to pay for it, and not our customers who are buying the services. So we don't want to pay for their services. But you just got to watch that creep and these costs, and little things like getting back to the pavers, when you're using the poly sand, right? Or depending on what type of edging material, plastic edging or concrete, making sure that you're counting and measuring how many bags they start to use. Because I found it very interesting. One crew, to do 100 feet uses X amount of bags. The other crew for 100 feet uses X plus. Because they're laying their edges wider with this poly mortar. So it really depends on watching your crews and, letting them know what they have to use on the job. Also communicate that.
Yeah, and I feel like that's where the benchmarking comes in. If you're tracking your labor hours, you're tracking your material, you're tying it back to the jobs, so you're weighing everything in, you can gain some valuable insights and identify, areas for improvement on that gross profit margin. So the challenge there would be if you're not tracking and you're not tying these things back together, you're never going to know what opportunities you have and where those opportunities lie.
Yes. So I want to go over real quick. I didn't do the mathematical formula for gross profit margin. So before we finish, I want to go over that. So you're going to take your total sales minus your cost of goods sold, which is your subs, materials, special tools, your equipment, and your labor. And you're going to subtract that from your total sales. And that's going to give you X. And then you're going to divide that by your total sales. So total sales minus cost of goods sold, and then divide that by the total sales. And that will give you your gross profit margin.
Yes. Simple formula, but what
Yes.
it's telling you, it's giving you so many opportunities, to be aware and make improvements in your business.
Absolutely.
So some of the things we went over today, I'm going to cover these before we tie up. We talked about, making sure you're understanding your cost structure. Another thing is you can negotiate favorable terms with your suppliers. So making sure that you understand, what are you paying, what are you pricing, and then also having terms around those. And then evaluate and adjust your pricing strategy to optimize profitability without sacrificing your competitiveness. So what is it that you're doing that's unique, that makes you stand out, so you're not a commodity? So making sure that your pricing strategy ties to that. Maybe it's your high value, that you're highly communicative, you guys, your crew does a phenomenal job with custom work, like whatever it is. It could even be reliability compared to your competition in your market. And then thirdly, ensure efficient inventory management to avoid unnecessary costs in your business. So really looking at, what are the services that you're providing and how much does it cost to provide those services? Are there opportunities to streamline those services and also, purchase less material to do it, but without compromising the value? And the last thing I would say, which is one of my favorites, is leverage technology and automation to streamline your operations and reduce overall expense. So lean into the technology that you have and, or that you're looking at implementing in your company. And typically we find on the best day a company is utilizing 80% of a software platform and what it can do in their business. But mostly we find that they're only optimizing 20% of this software. So there's this 80% opportunity to streamline, automate, make things more efficient, and let the software work for you and create capacity and also transparency amongst your team and your business.
20% on a good day, I would say, is a really fair value. And there's so much more technology. You and I are going to be going to the technology conference in Las Vegas in August, and I'm interested to see what new technology or how much easier they've made existing technology. And I think that's really the key focus, is making the technology that is available easier to use, more fluent, more intuitive, so that we can really streamline what we have to do.
Yeah, I love that conference, from what they're talking about with software improvements, to things out in the field and even what can contribute to estimating and routing and even the automations with the equipment that they're creating. So it's pretty interesting and insightful to go there and learn from the different technology drivers in this industry.
Yes, I'm excited. Well, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today and for listening to this podcast. And we're going to have some interesting information about our GPA business triage response path. So if you're struggling in your business to hit that gross profit margin, check out that business triage response path. And also our Profit First Accountability Peer Group for lawn care and landscape businesses. And in that peer group, we meet once a month, but you also get to work with me to develop your gross profit margins and your prices. And we work pretty closely together to get that dialed in, because that's what's going to make the biggest impact the fastest on the business.
Yeah, and if you're also looking for a resource to get Profit First implemented in your business, which helps you improve your gross profit margin in your business as well, the peer group is the right place to be. You get a Profit First webinar, and you also get to show up on our office hour calls, which we answer all things Profit First twice a month. And there's some just fantastic conversations that happen in those calls from other business owners that are, in the journey of implementing Profit First, or who have implemented Profit First and they're trying to implement advanced methods at this point, and just gaining more insight in their business and the performance of their business.
Absolutely. Big differences before they start with us, and then during and as they proceed with us. It's awesome to watch that. That's why we're doing this. So to watch businesses improve and improve lives, families, and communities. Well, thanks everyone for joining in, and join us on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.